obviously we were a week away from the general election. It's all, for us interested in government and politics, a very exciting time. No one's entirely sure what's going to happen. I've seen too many opinion polls in the past to believe them completely, so we shall see. But today we are talking about, as Ben said, a subject that lots of people talk about. And you would think that it's something that's on people's minds. It might factor in the election campaign, but for those of you who, like I did, watched the two leading candidates for Prime Minister debate last night, I don't think I heard the words artificial intelligence or even AI mentioned. The subjects under discussion were, of course, important, but some people feel that the lack of focus, especially as the Prime Minister is well known as being an enthusiast of new technology and AI, but it didn't seem to come up in discussion. Anyway, we're going to try and rectify that today and give a bit of clarity about some of the issues and some of the positions being taken by the parties hoping to get our votes next Thursday. So, Tom, before we begin with the manifestos, bearing in mind I don't have a sort of technological background myself, why do you think AI innovation is so critical to be considered in government?
Okay, so Jonathan, can everyone hear me? You can hear me okay? Yes, yeah. Fantastic. It's a great place to start. First of all, let me just say as well, I thank so much for organizing this webinar and watching the final debate last night as well. Of course, there was no time to get into technology themes like this today. I think there was a little too much jostling back and forth between Sunak and Starmer on who had more integrity, I think. But so I think it's really important that we give some airtime to these themes other than those that were discussed last night. And I would start by saying, Jonathan, AI has now been called electricity. It is no longer a trend. It is no longer science fiction. It actually could be one of the most transformative innovations that we will see in our lifetimes. I think probably surpassing even the internet and smartphones. And then for government in particular, AI innovation is critical because it has real potential to transform public services, making processes more efficient, making them more accurate, driving economic growth, even helping ensure national security. So, and amongst many other things, like it really allows for data-driven decision-making, super important for our government, which can, of course, lead to better outcomes in areas like healthcare and public safety and education. And I think I would say that additionally, as society, as our citizens and our businesses increasingly adopt AI tools, the government really needs to stay current with these trends in order to meet citizens and businesses' expectations. The government really needs to understand its power and its potential, and of course, its dangers as well. This is by no means just a rosy story here. There are inherent challenges and even dangers in AI. So, I mean, just take the current election that we're in right now, and we've got an upcoming one in the U.S. and an upcoming one in France and many other countries around the world. Just the theme of deep fakes, as we're hearing about, which of course are those highly realistic AI-generated videos that showing someone saying or doing something that they actually haven't done. That's a massive threat. And then, of course, there's more mis and disinformation because of AI at the moment. So it's just super critical for our government to understand all of the potential as well as all of those risks.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I was expecting more deep fakery and more scandals during the election over, misinformation. I wasn't actually expecting a scandal about placing bets on election days and other things. I mean, that one took me by surprise, even with many years of experience. But yeah, I was expecting there to be lots of sort of mock-ups of the party leaders saying extraordinary things that then went viral before anyone sort of established they weren't real. And that, thank I'm grateful, and I'm sure most people are, that that hasn't happened, because that would be a downside that we can all do without these days. It was a bit different when I was younger. You all tuned into the BBC or ITV, and that was your information. There's now so many sources, but working out which are the credible ones is more and more difficult every year. But just turning back to government as opposed to the political side, how would you summarize the key considerations and challenges of implementing AI in government?
Oh, great. Well, some of those I just mentioned, but I guess I would summarize in terms of key considerations really involve balancing innovation with privacy and security. I would say ensuring the ethical use of AI overall, but certainly in government, and managing public expectations are also super important. When I think of challenges, and there are many, I would include things as simple as technical integration of AI systems with our current systems, all the way to the more complicated upskilling all of our workforce to handle new technologies and new ways of working, and definitely securing public trust through transparent and accountable AI deployment. There is another massive challenge that I would highlight, and that is data. So in terms of preparing data for data to use with AI systems, of course, data is the lifeblood of any AI system. And we need to make sure we remove any bias from some of our government data. As we know, we've always heard garbage in, garbage out. Now, I'm not saying our government's data is garbage, but it's just the fact that our government data is historical data. So things like employment records that might reflect gender or racial bias because it is past information. I would say there's so much complication or so much to look at under the hood of all of this. One of my first tips for our attendees, I would point them to the gov.uk website, because there's a great guide to using artificial intelligence in the public sector. And that covers how to assess, how to plan, how to manage AI, and how to use AI ethically and safely, and also some great examples of AI in use. And that could be really interesting, I think, for some of our international attendees who may want to see in a bit more detail how the British government has approached this.
Yes, yeah. I mean, of course, we've had, I think the UK has taken the lead in many ways with a couple of summits recently, one at the famous Bletchley Park last autumn, and another co-hosted with Korea that recently took place in Seoul. But they were very much about, or at least the first one I recall, very much about potential dangers and how to ameliorate those rather than the opportunities. If we can turn now to the manifestos and what the parties are offering. I've read a few of the manifestos, as I know you have. References to technology and AI did not leap out from every page, but they still featured, and they were still significant mentions. So if you would like to talk about those a bit and how the party's strategies differ from each other, I'm sure we'd all be interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I did a very deep dive into the manifestos, and thank goodness I had some AI tools as well to help me do quite a lot of analysis. And I'm just going to turn. I've got 3 screens here around me to help with all of this analysis. So I'm just going to turn to one of them now, and just to make sure I get this absolutely right. I would say overall, kind of the main differences lie in the focus areas and the extent of regulation around AI. Some parties prioritize regulatory frameworks to address AI ethics, as we mentioned, and data privacy, while others emphasize leveraging AI for economic growth and competitiveness. So let's have a look. First of all, we'll take the Conservatives. The Conservatives do typically, and looking at the manifesto, typically advocate for AI that bolsters economic strength and national security. focusing on technologies that drive innovation across industries. You could say it's a real pro-innovation approach when you step back and look. I would summarize it as the Conservatives really aim to maintain the UK's leadership on a global stage. Lots of continued investment in AI research, innovation, and of course also the development of ethical frameworks. For example, their manifesto says things like securing the UK's position as a world leader in innovation AI will accelerate the human progress in the 21st century, just as the steam engine and electricity did in the 19th century. So they're really pulling that out. The UK is well positioned to spearhead this transformation and is already leading global work on AI safety. So they also cite a few examples of AI freeing up doctors and nurses' time for frontline patient care. They also cite the police in terms of giving officers new powers and new AI tools to catch criminals, including, of course, AI technology like facial recognition. I would say that most analyst views that I've seen around this reflect that emphasis on pro-innovation. And they kind of see it as attracting a lot of investment and maintaining the UK's competitive edge, really. And then the public response that I've seen from this is the common point of discussion of that balance between fostering innovation and ensuring safety and ethical use. If we turn quickly to Labour, then slightly different approach. Labour, not surprisingly, is emphasizing using AI to improve public service quality and accessibility, supporting initiatives that directly benefit health, education, social welfare, etc. Their strategy really focuses on boosting productivity and supporting startups, while very, very much, though, ensuring public trust and transparency in AI applications. For example, their manifesto says, we will ensure our industrial strategy supports the AI sector, but I quote, Labour will ensure the safe development and use of AI models by introducing binding regulation on the handful of companies developing the most powerful AI models. This has been pretty much positively received by analysts, as I can see, as a move actually towards democratizing AI, which is a really interesting concept, and in kind of just ensuring broader societal benefits. General public's response, again, largely favorable, appreciating, I think, very much that focus on ethical use and inclusivity. I'll pick out just a couple of the others. For example, the Liberal Democrats. So the Lib Dems kind of surprised me. Did it surprise me? I don't know. But let's just say, based on the facts, I look at the manifesto, and there's a real push for strong ethical guidelines as well. Maybe also a bit similar with Labour. Their manifesto says some things like create a clear, workable framework for artificial intelligence that promotes innovation while creating certainty for AI users, developers, and investors. Establishes transparency and accountability, ensures the use of personal data and AI is unbiased, transparent, and accurate. So I spot that the analysts see the Liberal Democrats kind of historical support of ethical AI use, and certainly their support of digital literacy as aligning well with the current global trends. If I see the Green Party, there's no surprise here, of course. They focus on AI applications that support environmental sustainability, like optimizing energy use and enhancing conservation efforts. So again, no surprise there. They emphasize ethical and sustainable AI use. And obviously the public's response is positive among that see kind of the integration of AI into sustainability efforts as quite a progressive one. And then I think maybe lastly, again, the Reform UK has been interesting as we see it kind of growing a bit in popularity this particular election. So I had a close look at that. Even though I had to look very closely, I had to really dig. But they seem to stress AI to streamline government processes and reduce bureaucratic inefficiencies. So like I said, I had to really kind of look for that. But their manifesto says, for example, more bobbies on the beat. Now, our international listeners may be scratching their heads now. I didn't even know we still use.
You want to explain, or shall I? Yeah.
So
police officers, yeah.
Yes, police. So they want to ensure that the police return to the beat, and that they're using better technology and stop wasting time on paperwork, is what they say. So hopefully the increased efficiency of AI, maybe we can read behind the lines there. And then lastly, I guess I dig down, I see comments like incentivize the use of new construction technology that incentivize innovation to speed up building. Now, maybe there's some AI in that. It's just not inherent or very obvious to me. And then honestly, I really struggle to find anything in the Scottish National Party or our Wales party, Plaid Cymru. So again, I guess, Jonathan, I would just summarize all of that I just went through as you can kind of see, some parties prioritize regulatory frameworks to address AI ethics and data privacy, like Labour and Lib Dems, and then others emphasize more leveraging AI for economic growth and competitiveness, like the Conservatives, and maybe reform. Not sure it. I'm not sure, as it doesn't specifically say give AI tools to the bobbies.
Well, that's a whole different issue. I know there is some controversy over police use of AI. And if anyone from abroad is interested, one of the nicknames we have for police officers in the UK is bobbies, and that is because the Home Secretary back in not even Victorian times, I think, when he did this, it was just before, was Sir Robert Peel, hence bobbies. That's when I think Ben will correct me, he's a historian, but when the Metropolitan Police was founded. It is interesting, though. It struck me that AI, as opposed to just being a standalone issue, yes, absolutely right. They're peelers as well, although we don't use that nickname as much these days. Very good. AI is a tool that people just getting to grips with, certainly in the governmental and political world. But it's also in those manifestos being used as a tool to promote existing policies and causes that each of those parties had. So, you spoke at the end about, reform, obviously a focus on law and order. How can we harness AI to pursue that? The Green Party, obviously their raison d'etre is the environment. How can we use AI? So that did strike me, that it's not just a new topic to have its own section in the manifesto. It flows through everything else, and parties' priorities and goals should they form the next government. But you mentioned at the start of that analysis that you'd used various tools to help do the research. As someone who only discovered ChatGPT about a year ago, can you just describe briefly some of the tools you use? Because I think we'd find that interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So AI in use, full on.
Yeah.
So for the analysis, I did use several AI tools, certainly including ChatGPT, as who would not, in terms of generating insights, as long as you do ask for the resource links from GPT for your answers, and also you fact check. We need to be aware of AI hallucinations. Well, Jonathan, do you know what a hallucination is?
Not in the context of AI. Enlighten me.
No, it's not an oasis suddenly appearing before us. An AI hallucination occurs when an AI system generates responses that are not based on reality. They're not based on accurate data. As a matter of fact, it can even make up facts and events. So hopefully that's not describing some of our politicians. But it's always important to really do some healthy fact checking. I would recommend tools like GPT, Google's Gemini, Perplexity, which are all similar tools to GPT. But you do, we just need to be very aware that these tools are fairly new. Chat GPT just came on the scene in November of 2022. It is a large language model officially, and it is learning. It's continuing to learn. And that's why they want us to use it, so partly because every time we're using it, it is learning more as a large language model. But at this time, it's, we just need to make sure that we're fact checking. There's some other tools that I used, for example, AI. There's AI features now in Microsoft Excel and in PowerPoint. And the thing that really jumped out at me was an AI assistant now in Adobe Acrobat Reader. So when I downloaded all of the manifestos into a PDF, when I started looking at those, suddenly I see an AI assistant in Adobe. And so I use that to help scan and analyze the manifestos for me. Again, though, with some healthy some healthy checking of this stuff. I did go back also to the word search, just kind of keyword search. And I would say, in saying that, you can see that I am thoroughly embracing all the new AI tools that are out there. But I say to everyone on this webinar, we need to have some healthy caution with them. I love in particular some research from Gartner, where Gartner kind of has a Gartner hype cycle. And in terms of generative AI, we are at the top of the peak of inflated expectations when it comes to AI. And of course, what comes next but the trough of disillusionment? Now, don't get me wrong, I still see AI as one of the biggest innovations we will experience, but all those shiny tools won't initially live up to some of the hype. I'll pull out one comment from someone. I also reached out to some of our top minds in the UK in terms of AI in preparation for this webinar, and much better minds than myself. And my favorite response came from Sir Nigel Shadbolt, and he is the principal of Jesus College in Oxford University. And he said this, and I will quote exactly because I really loved it. Enhancing government efficiency when using AI begins with a workforce that understands the strengths and weaknesses of AI augmentation. Even in embedded products like Copilot, and of course that's Microsoft's AI system, it's important that users know how to critically review the output of these tools. In areas such as HR, procurement, fraud detection, these tools are here to help but not replace. There's Gen AI for a whole range of citizen-facing services and also support for research analysis, but there is still a small percentage of content from these tools where fact-checking is still required. A bit like the debate last night.
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, that is always important to review what we're listening to with the many fact checkers that seem to have appeared in recent years to help us wade through the amount of information we're all receiving 24 hours a day, 7 days a week these days. I mean, I was struck when I first heard about ChatGPT. I thought, well, it sounds very interesting. I'm someone who enjoys writing and drafting, and I thought, well, this sounds like cheating. So I tested it. And I put in, something that I knew about, something to do with, say, politics or government, or some of the work, I was doing at the time. And I found that, it is a good prompt. It's almost like if you're trying to, write something, you've got a bit of writer's block. It can go, oh, you remember, but you really do need that knowledge yourself to get the best out of it. You can't just rely on it and submit things, that you haven't been able to review and edit and fact check, as you say. And also there's sometimes limitations with it's not entirely up to date on certain subjects. Its limits are sort of a year or two behind in terms of the information it's gathered. But talking of which, of course, there was a bit of controversy a while ago about the use of AI by civil servants in government departments, and what was allowed and what was not. And I don't know if you can sort of elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, certainly. So that's a really interesting question because, I think the use of ChatGPT, just as one specific example, can really kind of it can really kind of show where the parties actually sit. As we were just looking at the manifestos, I think that in terms of government, the use of GPT varies significantly across the departments. It's kind of based on their specific functions and the sensitivity of the information that they handle. And that makes complete sense. If I think about where the parties would stand on the use of that, so that's interesting, kind of our theme for today. It's a really good question because actually I think it will reflect their broader policy agendas and priorities. Take, for example, the Conservative Party. I think that there would be a more aggressive adoption of ChatGPT, a little bit like Rishi's aggressive approach last night. They would likely promote more use of GPT to drive economic growth and maintain competitive advantage internationally. And then you let's take for a moment, just jump to the Labour Party. I would see them obviously as more cautious integration of things like ChatGPT. They would emphasize the ethical implications of AI and advocating for GPT in a way that prioritizes public welfare and job security. And then, yes, I think they have extensive trials and regulatory oversight. So it's an interesting kind of, it's interesting to take just that one AI tool example and then kind of place it against the parties and see how they would view those things.
Yeah, just to mention, thank you everyone for putting questions in the chat, which Ben is busy collating. We will turn to those shortly, but just a couple more questions from me to Tom first. Technology, as I say, I'm not an expert, but what are some examples in UK departments where we've actually already successfully utilized AI?
Oh, good. Another good one. I found some really, really good ones, and I've been hearing about these for a couple of years. Let me come over here to one of the mini screens I've got, and I think that you'll like this in terms of it's really being used across many, many various departments. One of the most high profile, I think, success use cases that we've got is the Department for Health, where they've utilized AI to analyze medical imaging data to detect diseases such as cancer more quickly and accurately than other traditional methods. Of course, this has significantly improved patient outcomes and efficiency in healthcare. You could jump to DEFRA. So that's our Department for Environment, Food, and Rural Affairs. They've implemented AI to monitor and classify kind of plant and agricultural cover around the UK from satellite images. Very interesting. Ministry of Defense, of course, using AI in various capacities like cybersecurity, national defense, AI systems being used for threat detection, things like that. You could jump to HMRC, and they're using AI for fraud detection and improving tax compliance. Even our local councils. So even our local councils have adopted AI to improve traffic management systems. I will say that here is a funny example for you. I really like this. It's unfortunate, but it shows that we need to test these systems. So the Cabinet Office, or GDS, was testing a new AI chatbot for gov.uk website. This is earlier in the year, and the test proved quite interesting because we had some responses coming back in French, believe it or not. When asked about renewing a driver's license, for example, the person asking suddenly was told how they could apply for a fishing license rather than a driver's license. And even it seemed to miss a little bit of the humor in terms of this AI assistant. Because someone jokingly said, how do I become prime minister? And the system, not getting the joke, really started to give an entire career path for someone who wanted to become prime minister. So I did notice when I was researching for our webinar that gov.uk still doesn't quite have yet the AI assistant on there. And maybe this is because this is why.
Yeah, I was actually made me think how English centric, and I mean that in terms of language, is a lot of these AI tools. How much gets lost if you're trying to use them in a different language?
Yeah, well, that is a great question. There's a double-edged sword there. One is the large language models. That is one of the quickest and easiest things it can do is translate into many multiple languages. So that can be quite a straightforward use of AI tools in terms of translation. But then the other edge of that sword is all of the nuances, like bobbies, for example, we said earlier, all of the nuances that may be across countries, across cultures, it would also have to learn all those different nuances. So in terms of just basic, straightforward translation of languages, super hot, right on it. But then it's still, I'm sure many of these large language models still need to learn a lot about nuance. For example, what's a fishing license as opposed to a driver's license?
Yes, yeah, cool. Well, I mean, I've long been teased by friends from abroad at the hopelessness of a lot of British people in learning foreign languages, a privilege we have due to the widespread speaking of English around the world. But I mean, there's no chance of us bothering now. We can just talk to our phone and get a translation, is there?
Oh, absolutely. Jonathan, just on that, I would say I was in Italy 2 weeks ago delivering a session on AI to an Italian company. And I was always able to have Chat GPT 4.0, which is based on voice and language. And I was able to do very quick translations and clarifications right there, standing in front of the classroom. So it really shows you how that can be used quite easily.
Yeah. We talked a bit earlier about the sort of ethics of AI and the responsible use of AI, something that worries people on a whole range of levels. What measures are being proposed to ensure a more ethical use of AI in government at the moment?
Well, one of the biggest, as we mentioned earlier, it is one of the biggest considerations. So responsible and ethical AI really involves establishing clear guidelines for AI's use that ensures things like transparency, accountability, fairness, really clear in terms of what are the algorithms that are being used and how is the AI making decisions and providing content. It's a massive consideration. Specific policies currently in the UK government are very much looking at this. So I would refer people to have a look at the data ethics framework and also the guide to using AI in the public sector. Both of those, again, can be found on gov.uk. Going back, give you a specific example, going back to that DEFRA example I gave of the use of AI in terms of using satellites, analyzing that data for landscapes and forest coverage, for example. Those are designed actually to be inclusive as well. Very interesting. So they are taking into account the needs of various stakeholders when they're doing that analysis. So including farmers and including environmental groups. So that's a really good example right there where some bias or some focus or making sure that all stakeholders are considered with an AI system. So I think that's very clear that they're looking at the needs and the considerations of farmers, as well as certainly environmental groups.
Yeah, I'm just gonna take a question from one of our viewers, and this is from Sheila. how do you see, Tom, the public understanding of AI being boosted? And is there a role for public libraries in this? So, I'm interested in that as well, as I keep saying over and over. How do I learn more about this changing
Yes,
world and,
yes.
get a better
It's a
understanding?
great, it's a great question, Sheila, and I think that in lying within that question is a further question about what is the future of our nation's libraries, especially with all of the digital information, with AI, etc. So I think whichever government is coming in soon after next week, that is a really good place to start, because one of the critical things, again, as Sheila is alluding to, is the education of the private and public sector. We need more people understanding what AI is, what it is not, how to use it effectively, and how to use it ethically. So education programs are absolutely fundamental. And I would like to see how we can actually utilize our libraries across the land in helping us do that. So I certainly will, and probably Sheila will as well, be somehow trying to raise that for the next government coming in, because education is just so fundamental with something of so much potential and of so much risk.
Yeah. And libraries obviously have been changing over the years, like many public services, and as has the technology. But this is a new, educational and training aspect to their role in the future. Not just, as important as being able to borrow novels to read and things like that is. This is a real economic benefit potential for the country as well, in terms of training for the workforce. Question from Deborah: how can we use AI to prevent unauthorized use to personal data? Something that worries a lot of people. Is there AI, instead of it being a threat, can it help us be even more secure?
Oh, absolutely. So we talked earlier about how AI is actually being used a lot in terms of national security and data security. So AI systems themselves can help us do that. And then, as I mentioned, things like the data ethics framework within government actually gives us guidelines and gives us guardrails in terms of the use of data. Obviously, there's so much data in government and so much of our private and public data that is out there. So as AI systems start using and accessing more of that data, that is why you are seeing things like a data ethics framework, and you're seeing things like guidelines to AI use in public service. So I think it is something that needs to continue to be on the radar, very much so. Again, very much so for the next government coming in. And then, as you now know, if that happens to be Labor, there will be quite a big focus on regulatory frameworks.
And a question here from Stephen, which is similar to some of the, before today's webinar, we were discussing potential topics. This is a similar question to one we were thinking of raising anyway, which is: how does the UK government compare against other countries in relation to its use and development of AI?
Oh, well, that's an excellent question. Where do we sit on a global scale? And I'm glad to be able to answer that question based on things like the Alan Turing Institute and the AR Standards Hub does do this type of analysis. And I'm pleased to say that typically across most of this analysis, you will see the UK kind of falling about third in the world. So that's a good sign. Number one is no surprise, and that's the US, of course, because it makes sense that so much of the technology industry is based in the US and based a lot in California. Second, usually, is Singapore, incredibly digital, incredibly innovative. Third is the UK. And then also you often see Finland and also Canada kind of making up a bit of the top five. I'm sorry for Stephen. I don't know where Italy is sitting on those lists, but
Yeah.
at least the UK, we're generally falling around the third on the list globally.
Right. Just turning back to the public sector, and again, this is something that has been debated in relation to generative AI, not just in everyday jobs, but even Hollywood actors worrying about it, about basically essentially being replaced by computers. How will some of these proposed AI policies or projected developments over the next few years affect job creation in the public sector? As you mentioned earlier, in terms of some of the manifestos, the parties think this could be a way to reduce spending, reduce the number of civil servants. But do you think that's realistic, or do you think there's things for people to worry about, or is it where some jobs become replaced by a computer, but it generates other jobs?
Yeah, I think it is all of the above. And let me tell you why I think that. Because it's a good question that touches on very common concerns that I hear quite often in terms of the robots are coming and AI is going to take my job. I like to always reiterate, typically when I hear that, it's not AI that's going to take our jobs. It's people that know how to use AI that can often take our jobs. So again, education, super important. But at this point in time, in terms of jobs, AI is less about eliminating loads and loads of jobs, and it's more about eliminating mundane tasks and time-intensive activities within roles. So it aims to increase productivity almost no matter what role you've got. So while AI will automate some routine tasks, potentially displacing some jobs, I think we need to be honest and open about that. Every innovation that we have seen over the last 100 to 200 years would have an effect on jobs. So I think we know that that is the case, and we can't pretend otherwise. But it also creates opportunities for new jobs. If I take both those scenarios, you can imagine data entry clerks, for example, receptionists, for example, and certainly content writers, you mentioned earlier. Those types of jobs will be impacted first, but then we'll also have new jobs like AI systems trainers, AI ethics officers. A lot of those types of jobs are already becoming quite popular. So I think that the focus for whichever government again takes over is on transitioning our workforce through retraining and reskilling. We need to ensure that employees are prepared to thrive in a more digital-oriented public sector, and certainly a private sector as well.
So the days of, I hope none of my colleagues are listening, the days of Friday, you've had a bit of a Thursday night, Thursdays being the new Friday, and you're doing light, repetitive administrative tasks to get through to the weekend. They will be gone. So you're going to have to do, I will, but as I say, none of them are listening. They won't know I've ever done that. We're almost coming up to the last few minutes. I have a question here, a very topical one with the rise of big tech. How will the new government regulate large and powerful tech companies such as Google and Facebook? And that's from Jill. Do you see any prospect of a different approach depending on who wins, or is this something that's going to, due to the power of big tech, is going to be ignored, or do you think a reckoning is coming at some point?
Yeah, so that's a good one. So I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here and just step back and not be opinionated about this, but look back at the facts again. And again, if we look at the manifestos of the Conservatives, very pro-innovation, very, let's utilize AI to the most that we can. I think that would lead to embracing more these large AI and tech companies. If I turn to the manifesto of the Labour and I stay very fact-focused, I see them regulating this a lot more, and therefore I see them probably regulating the large AI and tech companies equally. So on a bit of a limb there, so I just fall back to the manifestos, and it seems quite clear to me, most likely, where parties would sit on that.
Yeah. I think we've got time for one more question from our viewers. This is from Ellie. Tom, if you were going to audit a department's use of AI after the election, which would you pick? Have you got any favourite departments for the use of AI?
Okay. Well, immediately what comes to mind to me, in terms of my interest, and I think it would be fascinating for all of us, is to look at the Home Office, to look at one of the biggest topics that came up last night was around immigration,
Absolutely,
was around borders. So I would be really keen to understand more how the Home Office is utilizing AI for themes like that, or for concerns like that. How can AI, if AI ultimately, let's hope, can help us solve some of our biggest world problems like climate change, then you would think we could apply it to things like immigration challenges. So I think I would start with the Home Office.
Okay. Obviously, a department that whoever wins the election is going to be right at the forefront of government policy over the next Parliament. I think that's sort of time up for questions, but I just wanted to leave things with Tom, if you can suggest to our viewers and attendees here today, what's a good sources of information regarding AI that public servants can use to stay informed and involved in the development and implementation of AI?
Oh, good. Okay. So a good place to leave them with. So I've mentioned some very clearly earlier in terms of the data ethics framework, certainly the UK National AI Strategy. There's also the Office of AI. So they have annual reports and updates. So that'd be very interesting to have a look at those. And then, of course, we've got upcoming AI courses provided by Civil Service College, even. Certainly one that delves down into ethics and responsible AI. So, yes, let's stay informed.
Excellent. Right. Well, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. Ben's got a few things to say before we formally end the session. So, Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Hope we meet again someday. And we have an American election, so the debate is on slightly later tonight than the one we enjoyed last night. So maybe we can do another session around that at some point in the fall, as you would say. Yeah.
Yes, and Jonathan, I bet you that AI and technology things will probably not come up in that debate either. There will be too many other things taking its place.
But almost certainly there'll be some fake news. But I won't do my President Trump impression, but it's almost certain. Right, Ben. Yeah.
So thank you everyone for a wonderful discussion and for a lot of great audience questions as well. So appearing on your screen, I have a QR code that will link to all of our future webinars and In Conversation events. So we have a session coming up next month for free. That'll be on report writing. We're taking a little break in August, and then we'll be back in September with data visualization. If you want more of Tom, then please do check out our digital and data visualization courses. We have Advancing Ethical and Responsible AI in Government and AI in Public Policy and Governance. I've also included our contact information there, so follow us on LinkedIn and email inquiries@civilservicecollege.org.uk to stay on top of all things CSC. So thanks again, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Bye. Bye, everyone.